I've told a story before of a woman who came to see me while I was teaching in Massachusetts, whose husband had died some weeks before, and he'd been a healer in the community, a doctor, loved by many. And he died relatively young, leaving her with 2 children. So that when Jean, I'll call her, came to see me, it had been some weeks of shock and grief. And she was doing prayers and meditations, loving kindness practice, the Tibetan Book of the Dead, all these different things for her husband who had died so suddenly. But she came with a particular problem. She came and said that after a few weeks of grieving, and the community all came and brought food and supported her in her mourning and her family, she said one of her closest friends with whom she'd studied in a Tibetan community came and said, "You know, it's really all right. I have seen him. I've been doing the 49-day visualizations of the Bardo Tudol, of the Tibetan Book of the Dead, and he's now entering the Bardo of this particular green light, of this particular bodhisattva in this realm, and he's fine. You really can trust that." And she was very reassured to hear that. However, a couple of days later, when she was in another part of the community, speaking to another dear spiritual friend who was part of a Christian mystical tradition, this dear friend came up and said, "You know, it's really good. I've been waiting to see you, because in my deepest meditations, I've connected with him, and he's fine. He's just entered the heaven of the ascended masters, and it's all white," and he gave this whole glowing description. This made her a little uneasy after those 2 days, hearing that. So she decided to call a teacher that she respected deeply, who'd been a Sufi master that she'd studied with, to see if he could help her with this. And she called him on the phone, and first he again expressed his own condolences and care for her. And he said, "You know, before we go any further, I have to tell you that I've been really doing a deep meditation to stay connected with your husband, and it's fine. He's already taken birth again, or he's in the womb of this woman in Washington, D.C., and her family and so forth." At which point she became distressed and began to think, who do I believe? What do I do? So she came to see me to ask. And we sat down. She told me the whole story, and I looked at her, and I said in reply, "Rather than my giving you any other answer about the nature of birth and death, suppose we take it from an entirely different direction. Suppose instead you let go of all the ideas you've ever heard spiritually about what's supposed to happen when you die, the Tibetan Book of the Dead, the Christian mystical teachings, the Kabbalah, whatever it is, and all the other ideals, and instead we speak honestly from our human experience." I said, if someone were to ask you, as I will now, what it is that you genuinely know, independent of what everyone else has told you, what do you really know to be true? And she had to sit for a little while quietly. And she looked up and she said, "I don't know very much." That was a very wise thing to say. And then she said, "But I do know that everything changes." And I looked at her and I said, "You know, that may be enough. That piece of heart wisdom that you spoke is truly deep. And if you can live with that understanding, maybe that covers all the rest of what you need to know in your life."